everyone. My name is Adrian Aberdeen, and the topic that I'm going to be presenting today is quality astrophotography on a budget. Some shameless promotion for myself. You can find me on Facebook and on YouTube at Balcony Astro Imaging. I just want to say hi to my son who's watching. Hi, Ethan. It's almost time for bed, so get going. He's still my little apprentice. About a year and a half ago, I can't believe it's been a year and a half ago that I presented. He was helping me out on the balcony. He doesn't come out as much as he used to, but whenever it is that we have any outings, like there, for example, we were the picnic, the RASC picnic back in August, he was there at the DDO. So to begin, I have a huge update. I'm still on my balcony, and I'm not happy about it. That's a big update. And I'll tell you why it is that I'm not too happy about it. So shortly after my last presentation back last March of 2018, we had a massive windstorm that came through Toronto. And I had unfortunately left the telescope on the balcony. Thankfully, I took the scope itself off, but I left the mount on the balcony. And let's just say it took a tumble. So I'll play this little, yep, right here. And this is the sound that it makes. So anyone who knows about telescope mounts knows a sound like that is not good. So what happened is some of the bearings got, the teeth, the meshing, got a little bit out of whack. So thankfully I was able to have Blake and Jeff Booth help me out to be able to fix it. So I got it back up and running, and I'm happy to say it is good. What's not good, oops, is my next door neighbors decided to install LED lights all over the side of the building. So they moved from the sodium lights into LED. So I have 1, 2, and 3 that are now unfortunately straight coming at me on the balcony. So what I had to do was an ingenious solution, really, with a couple of friends of mine, Astro guys, who suggested coming up with a light shield, where I used some PVC piping here, and I used one small one and then one big one that fits inside of it, and then I just took a drill bit and drill some holes so I can then adjust the entire thing up or down, depending on where in the sky my object is and where the LED lights are coming through. So I'm very happy that so far I've actually seen better quality in my pictures with and without, between with and without the shield. So I'm happy with that. So a disclaimer, just so you know, anything that I mentioned, products that I mentioned in my presentation, I'm not affiliated with any of them. I don't get paid for any of them or anything like that. These are just my opinions, so take it as you will. So anyone who's starting off with astrophotography, some people tend to ask me, what would you recommend you start off with? Honestly, I would suggest you start off with something that's a small refractor. It could be a triplet, it could be a doublet refractor, but start with something that's around 80 millimeter. And I'll show you why, and I will show you why you don't want to make the same mistake that I did. And I wouldn't necessarily have a mistake, but I'll tell you what I mean by that. So this is 2 pictures that I took of the same object. This I took and I presented at my last presentation here of the M42, the Orion Nebula, the Great Orion Nebula. And this was in an H-inch SCT telescope. And this is the same picture in an 80 millimeter. And if you notice the parts of the Orion Nebula, it's the same as we have in here. So the 80 millimeter starts you off with a much wider, bigger scale field of view for your images. And that's the reason why I suggest an 80mm, because it's very forgiving, both when it comes to your guiding, as well as how much more of an object you can fit into it. So if you're getting into astrophotography, you set a budget. I'm not going to talk about money, because everyone's budget is a little bit different. But what I would say is I would recommend someone who's starting off, start off with a DSLR camera and then work your way up. If you want to, then by all means, you can go ahead and do an Astro camera, an actual astrophotography camera, and those work really well, and that's what I use myself. Also, you want something that is either a prime lens. So one of the lenses that you would use on taking pictures, regular pictures, for example, some kit lenses work okay, but I would recommend a prime lens that is usually in around the 80mm to 135mm focal length for it. I prefer using a 135mm, and I'll show you why. You can very easily put it on a tripod and get up to 30 seconds without major star trailing in your images. And then also if you use a tracking mount, then you can go a little bit longer when it comes to your exposures. Also check out, and I am a very strong proponent of using or buying used products. A lot of the products that I've used, I bought from the used market. My 88-inch telescope was used. My mount was used. Predominantly, almost everything that I'm going to be presenting on tonight that I've been using was used. So there's places like Astro by Cell, there's Cloudy Nights, there's Kijiji, and those kind of places where you can go and check out and look for used products. So what I settled on when I was looking to look into getting a wider field of view, pictures, is I realized that an SCT is good for certain things. A refractor telescope, let's say 80mm, is good for certain things. But then I also like massive objects where you're looking at huge nebulas. And I just wasn't getting that with the 80mm. So I said, how about I look into a 135mm? So I settled on the Rokinon 135 f2 prime lens. It's a very nice wide field of view. It's a great starter lens for someone who's starting off, and makes it perfect for if you're using anything like a star tracker. And I got this used on the market. The way I have it set up is, in this part, I have it here with my DSLR camera, which is the same DSLR camera that I use for taking regular pictures. It's not modified or anything like that. It's just a normal camera. So this is what you get in when you go into the 135mm range. So this is the same Orion, the same Orion complex that we were looking at just now, remember? Where we had the little piece up here. This is what you will get in an SCT. About this much is what you'll get in an 80mm camera, telescope. And this is what you're going to get in 135mm. So I took this off my balcony. I processed it in March, but it took me a little bit, I think I was in January or February is when I actually obtained the data. And again, that is taken from a balcony here in Toronto, in really light polluted skies. And actually it was taken, most of the color was taken with a DSLR camera, non-modified. So here we have the Seagull Nebula, and then down at the bottom, we have the little baby Thor nebula down here. If you're looking at this through an SCT, an 8-inch, for example, this is what you're gonna see. Whereas the 135 gives you the entire Seagull and then some. And then this is here is the Flaming Star nebula that I imaged back in March. So the Flaming Star is right here, and then I figured the NGC on this. And then over here we have a star cluster. So say yes to new adventures. So late last year into early this year, I was presented as if I wanted to join council. And I said yes. I'm a member of the club, and I would love to be on council. So one of the things with council is council members, tend to have a portfolio of things that they may be responsible for. So I got approached by Peter Richards, who asked me, hey, listen, you're coming out to a lot of the events that we have, both at Long Sault for our Dark Sky events, as well as the City Star Party. Would you be interested in taking over as the observant chair for the Toronto Centre? So I said, new adventure, sure, why not? But then I realized that I'm doing a lot more astrophotography versus visual. I can't tell you the last time I actually looked through a telescope. So I said, I'm going to need something that is going to be more portable, that I can easily take out with me while I'm at Long Sault or the City Star Party. And I started looking around to see what options I may come up with. So the first thing is, anyone who knows about astrophotography is you want to make sure that the mount is the most important piece. Because if you don't have a good mount, you can have the most expensive objective on your mount, but it's not going to be good if you can't take long exposure pictures. So I wanted to make sure that it's going to be lightweight and portable, easy to set up and tear down at the end of the night, and then also affordable. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to talk about pricing. So everyone you're free to make your decision as much as you want. So I started looking at star trackers, because usually that's what most people recommend when it comes to getting portability, if you will. So there was the Ioptron Sky Guider Pro, as well as the Skywatcher Star Adventurer. I was a little bit iffy on them, and the reason why is because I am lazy, if you will, when it comes to finding objects in the sky, and especially if you're imaging from the city. The odds are you can only see a handful of really bright stars, and so you're a little bit captured. I'm sorry, the word I'm looking for is restricted by what objects and how you can find objects in the sky. So I wanted a go-to. So eventually I settled on Skywatcher's new mount. Well, it's about a year or so or more on the market now, and it's very under the radar. And it's called the Skywatcher AZ-GTI, and it's a really nice mount, and I have it here, and I'll show it to you in a second. It has full Wi-Fi control, so you can control it with your phone. It has an 11-pound capacity, which is great. It has the go-to options that I wanted, so then that would allow me and also be able to do long exposures. It even also has an auto-guiding port capabilities where you can auto-guide when you're taking long exposures. So as the Earth rotates, your mount is also rotating, and then also you can send signals from your computer to the mount. And I scored big time. I got this, again, on the used market. So I had to do some modifications to get it into ready for what I want to do. And so it is an alt-as mount. So it doesn't track the night sky per se, especially when it comes to looking for long exposure pictures. So what I did is I had to purchase an Ioptron base, and there are other bases, EQ bases, equatorial bases that you can buy. I settled with the Ioptron, and that's it there. So I put it on top of the mount, and then, on top of the tripod, and then the mount on top of that. I also had to get a counterweight system for it, to be able to balance my rig, and then another little adapter. And then I also made the modifications here with the plate. I didn't like the original plate that it came with, so what I did is I went through and I had a spare clamp, which is both Lost Mandy and Vixen, so the V and the L type mounts, so I can use it back and forth depending on what I have on the go. Now, going out to Long Sault and as well as to our City Star Party here at Bayview and Shepherd, I really realized that I'm going to need power as well. So I looked into what I can take with me on the go, and I looked into these kind of guys where these are power banks that you can take. They're pretty cheap, relatively cheap, but not a lot of power, because you're going to be powering your mount, your telescope, your mount, your computer, your dew heaters. There's a whole bunch of things you're going to be needing power for while you're in the field. So you're going to need a decent amount of power. I also look into these kind of things where they're very good power, but they're very expensive as well. So the solution I came up with was I made my own power box. And so what I did is I bought a 95 milliamp hour deep cycle battery from Costco. And then I bought all the parts off of Amazon and made my own battery pack. And then one afternoon, I just watched a couple of hours on YouTube. I've never done anything electronic like this in my entire life. I like tinkering, but not when it comes to electricity. Something that I stay away from, but I had no choice. But so I did some research in it, and then with one afternoon, I sat down and then did the whole project and finished it off. And then a few months later, I bought 2 more batteries, and these ones were used as well, and they work really well. So these are 2 AGM 20 amp hour batteries. These guys here will probably last me for my entire rig, not including the dew heaters, probably 2 nights of imaging in those two small batteries here. So it's a great way of getting into it. So this is just a snippet of the actual setup. So here is the lens, the 135 millimeter lens. I'm using a recycling issue, I should say, is my original ASI 1600 ZWO camera, which is a monochrome camera here. And then I have the filter wheel that's attached to it, and everything is on a dovetail. Now, one of the things I realized as I started testing is these kind of lenses are very touchy when it comes to focus. Sometimes they're either in focus or other times they're not in focus. And there were many times when I went out to Long Sault, for example, I took 2 hours worth of data, I got home and I'm like, no, my focus was off and therefore I have to throw out the entire night's worth of work. So I said there has to be a way of coming up with some kind of a way of having an opportunity to be able to have auto-focusing attached to it. So what I did is I went online one afternoon, I like YouTube, and I did some research and realized that there are a lot of guys out there who are imaging who are using this little project called the MyFocuser Pro 2. And the way it works is you would buy an Arduino, just like Jim uses an Arduino in his projects. So I use an Arduino computer that's in the bottom of here, and then I attach what's called a motor shield. And the motor shield allowed me then to be able to attach a little stepper motor to it. And then I attached then with a belt and a pulley system here to be able to control the entire thing in the box here, which is the Arduino and the motor shield, and be able to control it with my computer. And so I can even run an autofocusing routine on my computer, which will take care of the focusing for me. So I can pretty much just set this up and go back to the car and warm up if I wanted to in the middle of winter, and let the computer take care of the rest for me, and then go from there. So what I did though is everything I bought standard, I did splice the wires here and put some connectors, and then I also had to create my own belt because most of the times you can find belts, they are made for people who have 3D printers, so they're much longer than what I needed. So I bought a kit that came up with a pulley system, and then I literally took a needle and threaded it and just stitched it together, and then I took some crazy glue and put it over it, and so the crazy glue soaked into the thread, and then that gave it the strength. And I'm happy to say that the entire project for autofocusing cost me less than $100. So I'm very happy with that. It keeps the cost down, and then now I can put more money into something else. So here's the complete setup here. So this was on my balcony the first time I got it, so the motor is not attached to it. I did put in an auto-guiding system originally on it, but I had some issues with the system. Because it was made as an alt-as mount, it's not necessarily, the gearing in it is not made for astrophotography. So I realized by testing that even though I've had issues with auto-guiding, and some people who have the mount have been fine with auto-guiding, I just gave up. I realized that this thing is actually pretty good because I can get up to 2 minutes or even further, longer exposures with no auto-guiding, just pure having it just track. And it does a really good job in tracking the night skies, which I wasn't expecting for, so it's bonus points for this little mount. And this is me here last week at our Millennium Square party. These pictures were taken by Peter Visma. So you can see how quite small the whole setup is, and I do have it here. I can show you. So if you're getting into astrophotography and you want to keep it on a budget, you can use APT, which is the astrophotography tool. It is nice and free. I like free. And it's great for someone who's getting started and just wants to get their feet wet into having a system that controls your camera, controls if you have a filter wheel, controlling that as well. Whereas some people prefer using the viewfinder. Let's say you're using a DSLR camera. Some people prefer using the viewfinder for looking at their images while in their field. But if you're taking, let's say you have a one-shot color camera that has a filter on top of it, the odds are you're not going to see that many stars when you're trying to focus on those things like that. Whereas if you were to use a program like this, it can pick up a lot more than your eyes can do. And then later on, as you progress, you can look into things like Sequence Generator Pro, which is what I use predominantly these days. I absolutely love it. One of the best investments that I've made. And then also, for polar alignment, which you can do on this mount even without a polar scope. And the way you would do it is you would actually use the main camera as your polar scope. So it pretty much doubles as it. Now, one of the things that's about SharpCap Pro is it will use, you can only have up to about 400 millimeter focal length. So you won't be able to do your polar alignment with, let's say, your main, if you have, let's say, a longer focal length telescope on it, or even a longer focal length lens, then you may have some issues. But at 135 millimeters, you're perfect, you're good. And I believe this was about $20, so not too expensive at all. Free again. There are programs for when it comes to stacking your images at the end of the night or whenever it is that you get around to doing it. The Deep Sky Stacker is really good for stacking your image, and then later on you can go into things like Photoshop or even a free program which is kind of related to astrophotography called GIMP. And then as you progress, in later on, maybe a year down, 2 years down the line, and you want something more robust, then you can probably look into something like PixInsight, which I absolutely love as well. That's probably the second best investment that I've made, and it's great. Not cheap, mind you, but great. So the results of this little system that I have put in here. So I have here the Sadar and Crescent area. I took this at Long Sault back in July, and this image is a mixture of narrowband filters. So we have both hydrogen alpha lines of data and then also sulfur 2 lines of data. And then I had taken oxygen 3 as well, but I had to throw that data out because of bad focus. So once I had all my focus issues taken care of, I went back and got the data for the oxygen 3 and mixed it in with it. So when you're looking on here, the picture is the brown stuff that's all the way out here. That's all hydrogen alpha. The blue stuff is oxygen 3, and then the kind of yellowish stuff here is your sulfur. And then here is the Heart and Soul Nebula, again taken at Long Sault at our Deep Sky Deep Sky Star Party. And again, when it comes to wide field of view, this is what you're going to get. If you were to take this picture in an SCT, let's say an 8-inch, you'd probably be getting about this much in your picture. and in a refractor, 80 millimeter, probably just about the part of the heart, and then with a 135 millimeter, you're going to get the entire complex in here. And this is it in hydrogen alpha as well. So this guy here has actually become one of my favorite objects. This is called the CED 214, and it's a really nice complex because it has this little companion guy that's right over here. And this is actually called the Skull Nebula. And the reason why is if you put it in a certain orientation, it actually looks like a skull. So we have the mouth here, there's a nose, the eyes, and then there's this here. So that's a skull. So I really like that guy. And then we have the entire veil complex that can fit into 135 millimeter focal length here. So we have the eastern veil, the western veil, as well as Pickering's triangle in here as well. So that's in a nutshell, my presentation. I have been bestowed on myself quite a few accomplishments over the last year or two, and just thought I'd like to share. So I got the jury selection on the Imaging the Skies contest last year by the RASC of RASC, and for my Sagittarius star cluster image that I'd taken about almost 2 years ago, which is actually printed in the plaque that I got. And then I got published in the RASC journal for the first time back in the winter, springtime, for my Horsehead and Flaming Star Nebula in monochrome. And that was taken from my balcony here in Toronto. And then also in August, I also got published again in the RASC journal for my M42 image, again taken from my balcony. This one actually took me quite a bit of time. I actually took about 3 months to gather enough data. And the reason why is because remember, I'm on the balcony, so I have a balcony in front of me, on top of me, sorry. Then I have what I showed you, the buildings next door, and then I got trees all over as well. So my window of imaging is quite limited. So what I would have to do is wait for Orion to come out at the end of its trek. So when people are imaging Orion now in October, November, I have to wait until January for it to come completely over, flipped over, for me to be able to get some data. So it took me quite a few months to get enough. So this is almost, I believe it was almost 12 hours of data and over many, many nights of collecting it. So I'm very happy with this picture. And thank you very, very much to the RASC for publishing it for me. And then also I got bestowed the Ray Thompson Award back in our RASC Toronto picnic by our president, Ralph Chu. So I'm very happy with that as well. I've been busy, as you can see. And then I presented a talk on PixInsight back at Starfest of 2019. And that same night, I got first and second place in the imaging contest at Starfest, so I'm very happy with it. And I'm happy to say, too, that this picture of the North American Nebula and the Pelican Nebula was taken with this setup. So I'm very happy with that, and that's a picture that came first. And the second picture is the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula. That image was taken with my refractor telescope, the 80 millimeter. That was taken last, so 2 starfests before that. So what about you? If I can do this, anyone can do this. Honestly, we're restricted with our night skies here in Toronto, but we try. I have to take what I'm given and hopefully make lemonade with it. So if I can do it, I'm quite sure anyone else can do it. The sky literally is the limit. So you can come on out if you are interested in astrophotography and you're in the center or you're watching this online and you're into the Toronto area. By all means, come out to our different events that we have. We have our dark sky star party at Long Sault Conservation Area, which is near Bowmanville, Ontario. And then the week following that is usually our city star party over at Bayview and Shepherd. So by all means, come out. I'm usually there because I'm the observant chair. Most times I'm there. So if you want to talk, or if there are a lot of imagers as well, especially at our dark sky party, where you can just shoot whatever ideas that you may have or questions that you may have. And that's the end of my presentation. I just want to say thanks to my wife and son for their continuous patience with me through the nights when I go missing for a night, as well as Penny and then the Astro Goonies. They know who they are. And then also the Toronto RASC. That's it. Thank you. So I'll just show you the setup here before we take in here. So the whole thing is right here. It's quite light, easy and simple. And as you can see, it pretty much, I would probably say maybe about 10 pounds, 15 pounds for the entire thing. And it works really well. Questions?
And just a comment online from Blake Nancaro. He says, Adrian, well done on the night shield.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's that night, the shield has been a saver because I noticed when you're taking pictures, especially with Sequence Generator Pro, it tells you how much exposed your images are as they come into your computer. I noticed a major difference when I didn't have the light shield on versus when I did, because the light was coming straight into my objective. And anyone who knows anything about that, what happens is then you get a higher readout of your images, as well as you get reflections in your pictures. So putting up the light shield definitely helped for sure. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, congratulations on your achievements, accomplishments, and
Thank you.
great images.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about your lens. I noticed that it's an f2,
Yes.
which is quite fast.
Yes.
Are you getting sharp images right to the edges?
I don't shoot at f2. I shoot at f2.8.
Okay.
And if it's a really bright object, I sometimes go to f4. The reason why is there is some issues at f2, especially at the corners. And it's even worse if your focus is off. It looks like you have a lot of marbles in your pictures. So I shoot at f2.
Okay.
Yeah.
F2.8?
F2, sorry, f2.8, yes.
Very good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another question from Blake. Firstly, he says amazing. And second thing he mentioned is, did I miss it? What software do you use for polar alignment?
I use SharpCap. So I use SharpCap Pro. It was about $20 US, I believe. And I'm up and running my polar alignment within less than 5 minutes. It's really easy and simple, the routine that they have. Whomever it is that created that program, kudos to them, because they did a really good job of making it very simple for anyone can use. Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? No?
All right. Thank you.